Well, continuing with our program Spotlight, I have the great privilege today to speak to two friends. In fact, when I used to live in Houston, Heidi Heinz, you're seeing her there with her red hair, was one of the outstanding people that I worked with at the Institute of International Education. And she is with her husband, Enrique Parrilla, and they have been living in Spain for, I guess, quite a long time. When did you first move, Heidi?
It's been 15 years now.
15 years already?
15 years.
It does pass quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I'm so grateful that you decided to take some time with us today. As I mentioned with you when we talked on the phone a few days ago, we've now talked to people in Israel, Tunisia, Taiwan. I'm going to speak with a diplomat in Canada next week. So give us an idea about what it's been like in Spain with COVID-19.
I started seeing this coming in December. I think the first sign that really concerned me was when they locked down Wuhan. And at that point, everything was fine here in Spain. We were doing life as normal. And then it really got serious when the World Mobile Congress in Barcelona canceled. And that's when, we finally—
That was at the end of February.
That was the end of the February. And that's when it was just like, oh my gosh, this is coming here.
And yet on March 8th, you had a major festival or at the Prada, didn't you? The International Women's March.
Yes. And
yeah, that was actually very controversial because there was reason to believe already that this was a serious pandemic that was coming, and the fact that some private companies, Google famously canceled their appearance in Barcelona, Facebook, Ericsson, people began to question whether or not it was wise to have this march. But this was a heavily charged political event. So for one reason or another, people looked the other way. The march did take place. As a matter of fact, Madrid is one of the areas that has the most amount of people infected, and it can all be traced to March 8th. There was a lot of controversy. A lot of people are saying that they're going to wait until the crisis passes, but they will ask for responsibilities afterwards.
And let's just put it in perspective. Spain has had the fourth highest number of fatalities, as well as the fourth highest number of cases. So right. You've been hit really harder than any country in Europe other than the United Kingdom.
Right, and I guess we're past Italy already too, right?
Well, we were, but now it's right, and a lot that is concentrated really in Madrid and Barcelona. And Malaga a little bit, but where
about
we are,
half the cases, yeah,
right. Where we are in southern Spain, in Seville, it's really been very light so far, and I think that's due to the fact that we went on lockdown very fast after it happened, or we found it in Spain, and I think people have been adherent. I mean, it scares me now because a week ago we started going into phase 1 reopening. Which we see a lot of people doing exercise in the streets, and more people than I feel comfortable out on the street.
Well, I read an article this morning and it said, if you think you are under some type of restrictions in the United States, you haven't seen anything compared to what Spain has gone through. And I saw, for instance, in certain instances, if you were over 70, you were allowed to walk after 7 p.m. and everybody else had to be off the streets. I think you have some video that really puts into perspective what the lockdown has been for you.
Right. It was what has happening in the last week or 10 days. They are allowing people to go outside, and they have very strict schedules. So, from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., you can go exercise. From 12 to 2, you can walk out children. From 6 to 8 p.m. I think it's elderly people can go.
Now let me interject. So tell us what we're looking at right now.
What we're looking at here is the downtown streets of Seville. This is the most popular area in all the city. These are streets full with people, with shops, with commerce, and this is in the middle of the day. I have an office in downtown. One of the activities I was allowed is to go to work, which I did do. A lot of people were not going to work because they were really afraid. So I was just shocked how empty the streets were. And I took this time lapse just to show that pathway, that stretch of it's about a mile from my office to my home. And the only people you can see are people walking dogs, which were one of the activities that was allowed. As a matter of fact, people were renting dogs to other neighbors so that they will be able to go outside because everybody was locked in. You will never see these streets like this at any time of the day. These streets have bars, they have people going back and forth. This is a densely populated area, and it's all residential. And you can see that it's just, it was very scary. I mean, I remember at the first few days of the lockdown, I'm not gonna say that I was not taking it seriously, but I was comfortable walking the streets. 2 or 3 days into it, it got scary. I mean, you step outside in a big capital like this, and you see nobody in the street, and there's some strange feeling that goes through your head.
Absolutely. Well, were pharmacies and grocery stores open? How did you handle that? Were there just special
Yes.
times when you could go?
No. You could go to the pharmacy. You could go to pharmacy, vet store, or food market and bread stores any time of the day.
And
Only alone.
Tobacco shops.
And tobacco shops.
Sure.
But only one person. You couldn't
Well,
go
the
as a
taxes
group.
being collected there, so we want you buying your tobacco.
Well, of course, in
the other
Texas,
thing-
they kept the gun shops open.
Oh, yeah, I got it. I don't know how many taxes they collect in that, but I can assure you the reason for cigarettes being sold here, it's just, I mean, I guess that people will go crazy.
You know, your country is so dependent on tourism. I think 15% of the GDP is devoted to tourism. And with where we are with international travel, this has got to be just a significant hit.
Yeah, it's been a massive hit. I mean, they're predicting a reduction in GDP, just unlike anything you've seen since Spain since the Civil War, the US since the Great Depression. And the problem in some areas is indeed that they are heavily depending on tourism. I mean, you get, I think in the South, it can be almost to 40% in some regions. There's really no manufacturing or activity other than tourism. And it's a beautiful place, come see it. So I think this is making a lot of people rethink how, what brings money to the economy.
You know, one of the issues in Spain, very much like what happened in the United States, is you really had very poor testing. I don't know if you still do, but I saw that you had bought testing and some other PPE equipment from China that was, to say it nicely, defective. Are you catching up now with your testing?
Yeah, there's a giant fiasco because indeed the testing equipment, of course, comes from China. And what happened is that within a week, there were procurement orders being, presented in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So you can imagine the amount of scams and the amount of people that just try to take advantage of this situation. So all sorts of middlemen, importing companies that would just, sell you something for, a bunch of tests for $65 million. And it turns out these were rejects from some other factory. So, I mean, this thing, as far as we can tell, has improved over time, just like it has all over the world. There was a recent study, I think was completed just yesterday, where they took a statistical sample of 38,000 families to try to understand how prevalent the virus was in the population. And they concluded that approximately 5% of people in Spain has come in contact with the virus. So that means, a country of 48 million, so you have 40 million so about 2.5 million or so have the virus. And they had to resort to statistical sampling because the tests were just not accurate. We have a good friend of ours is a pediatric cardiac surgeon at a local hospital here. And he was telling us about cases of children that had this very, very rare syndrome, Kawasaki syndrome, inflammatory response.
We're just beginning to talk about that here.
He's about 10 days or so, he was telling me that, he had seen one case like this in his entire career. And then within the span of a week, he saw 3. And he said there was this kid that had tested negative 3 times in the PCR, and they were still treating him as positive. And he said, look, if you're taking the positive result and the negative result and discarding it and treating as positive, you may as well say the testing. So they're beginning to focus more on the clinical, on the symptoms, on how the virus presents, than the actual testing, because they just do not have any guarantees about the reliability of
That makes
really
sense.
any testing. Even the best testing system is, they say that has a potential of 30% failure, which is,
Yeah. Tell me more about the
it's
reopening.
just not, it's unreliable.
You were just beginning to tell me
Yes.
about the different phases, and I understand that there are 4 phases, and it really depends by region. So compare, for instance, Seville to Madrid.
Right. So what one of the interesting things, one of the big differences between, just to provide our viewers with some of the differences between the states and how some of the other countries are dealing with this, is the fact that, I mean, over here you have a national response. So you have a single authority, you have a single strategy. A lot of people complain, you know, some local politicians are very outspoken, but at the end of the day, there's one strategy that is getting implemented. So one of the things they're doing is they're saying, okay, we're going to go, it doesn't make any sense to do the entire country at once because there are some areas that are more impacted than others. So we're going to take statistics on the number of new cases per day, the number of deceased people per day, and then determine, have a number of thresholds. And based upon those thresholds, we're going to allow some regions to, for example, open restaurants, allow people to get together, you know, more than 10 people, no more than 10, just to get together at all. I think the maximum amount of people that can gather right now is 10, so on and so forth. The idea is that you observe how the virus is behaving, and they are maintaining that, you know, look, if we see that the number of new cases begins to creep up, we may send that region back a phase or go back to containment.
And the
So
decision, let
it's
me ask, well,
very,
hold on. The decision for that is being made by the prime minister, or is it a decision that comes from your parliament? Because what I understand is that your prime minister, Pedro Sánchez, and incidentally, his wife tested positive and attended that women's march. But that just like in this country, you're seeing quite an uproar from different political parties that are calling for a much faster opening up. So who has
So
ultimate control?
the Ministry of Health, and there's a group of 12 people that are making the decision based strictly on scientific criteria. So there's a lot of political pressure, no doubt about it. But and it's beginning, you know, it's beginning to be like a just a cooker. I mean, the pressure is building up, but still, so far, just one policy, and it is implemented by the Ministry of Health.
Heidi, I want to hear from you about, you know, healthcare, because you certainly know the American healthcare system. I know your parents live in the state of Washington. How is it? Are you comfortable that in Spain that people who need the care are getting it? Because I understand that there's really a gigantic difference between access to services in cities versus the rural areas, and Spain devotes really a very small amount compared to other European countries of its GDP to health.
You know, I've been really, really pleasantly surprised, and I feel very comfortable about the healthcare system here. We actually have, there's a public healthcare system and a private, and we use both of them. But if I had to choose one for serious conditions, it would be the public. And I have to tell you that our region has an app, a healthcare app, basically, where you can, you know, find out information about different things that are going on. And as soon as coronavirus hit, they had a special area on this app where you can go and get information. You can take a little quiz. You can actually request an appointment for your doctor. And your doctor is very close by, and they monitor the whole healthcare system of the region, of the city, wherever you are. So I have to say, I'm very, very pleased with the whole way the healthcare system is working.
You know, we have just a minute or two left, but I want to give you a chance to respond to an article that I read in the New Yorker. And the New Yorker, you know, is considered a pretty good publication. They have a whole staff of fact checkers. And an anesthesiologist was quoted as saying that, at least at a certain point in time, that patients over 75 years old were being turned away from the ICU. Was that just one instance, or is that something that perhaps did occur for a period of time?
I can tell you that every single hospital, every single system that is dealing with this will face that problem when they have, you know, too many people coming in for limited resources. And it's a fact that I don't think is you know, unique to Spain or Italy or the United States or the UK. There is not, there aren't enough respirators for every single person in the world. So, you know, if you have a limited resource available and more people who need that resource, then of course you're going to have to make those decisions. And, you know, I've talked to ER people, you know, around the world, and everybody faces this at some point. It's not specific to the coronavirus.
Yeah, and I'm going to claim that there's the quote is misquoted or is not accurate. There was never a criteria for age. There was concern at the height of the pandemic that you know, if you had 100 sick people and you only had enough space for 20, you know, what criteria you follow? How do you choose who you treat? And they were talking about this team almost being like a war zone where you have to triage patients and just make decisions on who has the best chance of just getting better. But there was never a standing order about age or condition or anything like that.
Do you expect your universities and schools to be open in the fall? That's something that we are beginning to really hear universities begin to close or announce that they won't be having students on campus this fall in the United States.
I think it's a little too early to tell. They're talking about, you know, making classrooms, yeah, alternating kids coming into classrooms so that they can have the space. I really don't know at this point. I don't think there's
going to be classrooms. I mean, September is around the corner. This virus is the same thing that it was 2 months ago. If there was no vaccine 2 months ago, it's not going to be a vaccine in September.
And I
people are
saw
beginning to question it.
That your numbers, while they were going down, now they're going up a little bit, just like they are in certain parts of the United States.
Right.
Just want to thank you so much for being with us, and stay well, and hope to see you both in Texas in the not too distant future. Thanks so much for being with us.
That would be awesome. Thank
Spotlight.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.